The night I signed the marriage contract with my CEO, I told myself one simple lie: it was just business. Nothing more. Nothing emotional. Nothing real. But standing in that quiet bedroom months later, watching the woman who had once been my boss stare at me with eyes full of something far deeper than business, I realized the truth had quietly crossed a line I never meant to step over. Before we begin this story, take a moment to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us how unpredictable life can be, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. My name is Daniel Carter, and a year ago my life was falling apart faster than I could hold it together. I had once believed hard work could solve everything. I worked long hours, stayed loyal to my company, and believed that if I kept pushing forward, things would eventually fall into place. But life has a strange way of proving that belief wrong. The tech company I worked for was collapsing under bad investments and poor leadership decisions. Within weeks, hundreds of employees were laid off. I was one of them. Losing the job would have been painful enough on its own, but my situation was worse than most. My father had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt. My younger sister was still in college, and I had promised my family I would help support her education. Every responsibility seemed to land on my shoulders at the worst possible time. For 3 months, I searched desperately for work. I sent resumes everywhere, attended interviews that led nowhere, and watched my savings slowly disappear. Every rejection email felt heavier than the last. One rainy evening, when my hope was almost gone, I received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID displayed the name of the largest company in the city, Caldwell Industries. It was a corporate giant that most people could only dream of working for. But the real surprise wasn't the company. It was the person who asked to meet me. Her name was Olivia Caldwell. She was the CEO. At only 32 years old, Olivia had already built a reputation as one of the most powerful and intelligent business leaders in the region. She had inherited the company from her father, but instead of simply maintaining it, she had expanded it into something far bigger. People described her as brilliant, focused, and impossible to read. The next morning I walked into the towering glass headquarters of Caldwell Industries feeling completely out of place. My suit was old, my shoes were worn, and my confidence had been damaged by months of rejection. When Olivia Caldwell entered the meeting room, the entire atmosphere changed. She wasn't loud or dramatic. In fact, she spoke calmly and directly, with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove her authority. But what she said next shocked me. She wasn't offering me a job. She was offering me a contract marriage. At first I thought it was a strange joke or some kind of misunderstanding. But Olivia explained the situation with cold clarity. Her father had left behind a clause in the company's ownership structure. In order to maintain full control of the corporation, she had to be legally married within the year. Otherwise, several board members would gain voting power over major decisions. She had no interest in marrying for love under pressure. She needed a partner she could trust, someone who understood the arrangement was temporary and purely professional. Someone who needed the money as much as she needed the marriage. The contract was simple. 1 year of marriage. Public appearances together. A shared home for the sake of appearances. Complete confidentiality. At the end of the year, we would quietly divorce. In return, she would pay me more money than I had ever earned in my entire career. I remember sitting there in silence, my heart racing as I processed the situation. Everything about it felt strange, even absurd. But when I thought about my sister's tuition, my family's debt, and the reality of my empty bank account, the decision became painfully clear. 2 weeks later, I signed the contract. The wedding itself was small and private, attended only by a few executives and legal witnesses. To the public, it was presented as a quiet marriage between a powerful CEO and a man she had met through mutual connections. No one knew the truth. At first, our arrangement worked exactly as planned. We lived in the same enormous house, but our lives remained separate. Olivia worked long hours at the office, often returning home late at night. I spent most of my time studying business strategies and helping with small projects she occasionally trusted me with. Despite her reputation as a cold executive, Olivia treated me with surprising respect. She never spoke down to me or treated me like an employee. Instead, she treated me like a partner in the strange agreement we had both signed. But living under the same roof with someone changes things. Slowly, I began to see the person behind the powerful CEO image. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I would sometimes find her sitting alone in the living room, staring at old photographs of her father. The confidence she showed the world seemed to fade in those private moments, replaced by a quiet sadness she never spoke about. I also noticed the pressure she carried every day. Running a massive company meant constant meetings, endless decisions, and the weight of thousands of employees depending on her leadership. She rarely complained, but the exhaustion in her eyes became harder to ignore. One night, after a particularly difficult board meeting, she returned home looking more drained than I had ever seen her. Without thinking, I made her a cup of coffee and left it on the table beside her. She looked at me with quiet surprise, as if kindness was something she rarely received. From that moment, something between us began to change. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was subtle. Small conversations during breakfast. Quiet laughter during late-night work sessions. Moments where the business contract between us seemed to fade into the background. For the first time in months, I felt like my life had direction again. But everything changed on a cold winter evening. That night, Olivia and I attended a high-profile corporate event where several board members were present. The entire evening was about appearances, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, and presenting the image of a successful married couple. But behind those smiles, tensions were rising within the company. One particular board member, Richard Halston, had been trying to undermine Olivia's leadership for months. He believed she was too young to run the corporation and wanted to gain control himself. At the event, he publicly questioned her decisions in front of several investors. I watched as Olivia maintained her calm composure, responding professionally to every accusation. But I could see the anger burning quietly behind her controlled expression. Later that night, when we returned home, the emotional pressure finally broke. For the first time since I had known her, Olivia looked completely vulnerable. She stood in the bedroom, the silence between us heavy with everything she had been holding inside. That was the moment our contract marriage crossed the line. Not in a dramatic or reckless way, but in a deeply human one. Because for the first time, Olivia Caldwell didn't look at me like a business partner. She looked at me like someone who needed support. And in that moment, I stopped seeing her as my CEO. I saw her as a person who had been carrying the weight of the world alone. From that night forward, everything between us changed. The distance we had carefully maintained began to disappear. We started spending more time together outside of business obligations. Long conversations replaced the quiet silence of our early months. I learned about her childhood, her struggles growing up under the shadow of a powerful father, and the loneliness that came with leading such a massive company. And she learned about me. About my family. About the responsibilities that had pushed me into accepting the contract in the first place. The more we shared, the harder it became to pretend our marriage was just an agreement on paper. But the contract still existed. And the one-year deadline was approaching. As the months passed, the company began to stabilize under Olivia's leadership. Investors regained confidence, new projects succeeded, and even some board members who once doubted her started to respect her decisions. Yet something else was changing too. The closer we became, the more I feared the day our contract would end. Because somewhere along the way, my feelings had stopped being part of the deal. They had become real. The final turning point came near the end of the contract year. One afternoon, Olivia called me into her office with a serious expression. The board had finally approved a restructuring plan that secured her permanent control of the company. The clause in her father's will no longer mattered. Which meant our contract marriage had officially served its purpose. We were free to end it. She explained the situation calmly, just like she had explained the contract a year earlier. But this time, something in her voice felt different. There was hesitation. Uncertainty. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I stood up and prepared to leave the office, believing our strange chapter together had come to its natural end. But just as I reached the door, Olivia said something that stopped me in my tracks. She admitted that somewhere along the way, the contract had stopped feeling like business to her too. She didn't say the word love. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the quietest confessions carry the deepest truth. A few weeks later, we held another private ceremony. This time, there was no contract. No agreement. No expiration date. Just two people who had accidentally found something real in the most unexpected situation. Life doesn't always follow the plans we carefully design. Sometimes the most meaningful connections appear in the strangest circumstances. And sometimes, the lines we promise never to cross are the ones that lead us exactly where we were meant to go. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. And before this story ends, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me, do you believe love can grow from something that started as nothing more than an agreement? Your thoughts might inspire the next story we tell.